Tuesday Newsday. Tuesday Newsday.
Here's the first of two articles on the same topic. This one is titled Minnesota Senate GOP tries again to end COVID-19 emergency, written on July 13th by Tim Pugmire. For the second time in a special session, Senate Republicans voted to end the peacetime emergency that Governor Tim Walz first declared in March. That declaration has allowed Walz to take executive action on matters related to the pandemic without legislative approval. Senate Majority Leader Paul Gazelka, Republican of East Gull Lake, said the emergency powers are no longer needed. There are many things that the governor has emergency powers over that we're saying must end. We need to get back to a place where the House and Senate have equal footing on the executive branch, the top Senate Republican said. Democrats in the Senate opposed the resolution. Senator Jason Isaacson, DFL Shoreview, compared the action to end emergency powers to sticking your head in the sand. I can't imagine why we would support this, when our governor is doing an excellent job in putting us in a position to survive this with the minimum amount of damage. House Democrats also support the governor's position and will prevent the emergency from ending. Earlier Monday, Walz addressed the need to continue the emergency. He told members of the state executive council that the pandemic requires rapid adjustments. The ability for us to be able to act quickly to continue to test, to continue to be able to provide resources that otherwise we wouldn't be able to, the governor said. So, the narrative around this is not having the powers the legislature would be able to act nimbly. I just don't think it's based in reality. Lawmakers have other things to deal with. The list includes a $1.3 billion public works bill, tax breaks for farmers and small business owners, and the police accountability measures that dominated last month's special session after the killing of George Floyd. There was a big gap between the House and Senate on the police issues, but Gazelka said there has been progress. We are trying to move to a place that we can agree on, he said. I laid out some principles that we don't agree on. So, if we can keep those off the table and work on the things that we do, I expect us to get something done. Gazelka said Republicans firmly oppose putting the Attorney General in charge of police misconduct cases. They're willing to support a ban on chokeholds and establishing a duty to intervene for police. DFL House Speaker Melissa Hortman, DFL Brooklyn Park, Democratic Farmer Labor Party, said she is optimistic about getting an agreement. I don't think that failure is an option on police reform and accountability, she said. When we all watched the video of George Floyd's last minutes of life, something changed in us and in Minnesota that can't be put right without taking action. We must take action. The duration of this special session remains unclear. Senate Republicans said their plan following the emergency power debate was to adjourn for up to a week and allow the House time to pass bills and send them their way for further action. On the Public Works bonding bill, House and Senate leaders appear in agreement on the size and scope. But the $1.3 billion bill still faces a major obstacle. So far, House Republicans have held firm on their threat to withhold needed votes on bonding until the governor ends his emergency powers. But Hortman believes that sufficient votes can be found by combining bonding and tax cuts in one bill. By putting those two issues together, we make it possible to have a bonding bill and a tax bill, Hortman said, where neither would be possible on their own. A second article, written one day later, on the same topic. Again, what I'm asking you to look for here is tone, sort of the differences between one perspective and another perspective. This one in particular was written for the St. Cloud Times. Governor Tim Walz and his administration say the peacetime emergency declaration is needed to keep tackling the rapidly evolving issues stemming from COVID-19. But Republicans in the legislature want a more active role in the state's COVID-19 pandemic response and voted Monday to end the governor's special powers. Central Minnesota senators opposed the emergency declaration too. Decisions such as whether our kids should go back to school, what businesses should be open, and more should be made by the collective voices of Minnesotans and their representatives, not just one person, said St. Cloud Senator Jerry Ralph in a statement Monday. The Democratic majority in the House is unlikely to challenge the emergency, and it would take both chambers to end it. Republicans have pointed out that this is the longest peacetime emergency in state history, and Walz noted that 49 states remain in COVID-19 emergencies. The peacetime emergency has provided us tools to save lives and mitigate the devastating effects of this pandemic, Walz, a Democrat, said in a statement released Monday. As cases skyrocket in other states, we can't let our guard down. The legislature is back in St. Paul for the second special session of the year. On the docket, a bonding bill and police reforms. Walz extended the peacetime emergency declaration by executive order on Monday, exactly 4 months after he initiated it. And senators voted for a second time Monday to curtail that declaration and the executive powers that come with it. In Minnesota, the daily COVID-19 death toll dropped to single digits most days in July, but other parts of the country are reporting record high daily case counts and deaths. Legislature. So what happens, or what have Minnesota lawmakers passed or failed to pass in 2020? More than 1,500 people have died of the infection in the state as of Tuesday, and 43,000 have contracted the novel coronavirus. Nationally, nearly 3.4 million people have contracted it, 1% of the population. And 136,000 Americans have died, according to the Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Resource Center. COVID-19 continues to present an unprecedented and rapidly evolving challenge to our state, Walz said in the Monday statement. The emergency declaration has allowed the state to collaborate to ramp up testing and coordinate a statewide emergency response, including expansion of hospital bed capacity. It also led to the closure of schools and businesses to mitigate the spread of the virus. The emergency declaration was made so we could prepare for the projected surge and flatten the curve, Ralph said. Those goals have been accomplished, and we no longer have any need for the governor or for the emergency to be dealt with unilaterally by Governor Walz. Ralph voted to suspend the peacetime emergency along with Rockville Senator Jeff Howe and Princeton Senator Andrew Matthews. All 35 Republicans in the Senate voted to end it along with one Democrat, Senator Kent Eakin, whose district includes Moorhead. Yes, there is a pandemic. No, there is no longer an emergency, said Senate Majority Leader Paul Gazelka, Republican East Gull Lake. We had to make sure we had enough protective equipment. As time has gone on, we have put everything in place to respond. State DFL Party Chairman Ken Martin called Gazelka dead wrong in a statement on Monday. Minnesota Republicans were remarkably irresponsible when they voted to end Minnesota's state of emergency and drop our guard against this deadly pandemic, Martin said. States across America that refuse to take COVID-19 seriously are seeing a massive resurgence in cases, and Minnesota would almost certainly be among them if Republicans got their way. Here's what Howe had to say about his vote. Today, we voted to end Governor Walz's peacetime emergency powers because it is time to restore the balance between the executive and the legislative branches and give Minnesotans their voices back in government, Howe said in a Monday statement. Coupled with the decreasing amount of new cases and single-digit deaths, we decided today to end those powers to take a seat at the table to ensure that the voices of our communities are heard while we continue to deal with this virus and begin rebuilding our state. And Matthews spoke during the floor debate Monday. It seems like the governor is going to keep emergency powers unilaterally for the long haul. I'm disappointed by the characterization that we claim it's not a big deal. We all understand that we still have COVID-19 and we still need to protect ourselves, Matthews said. I don't recall one person in my district asking me, Senator, help us get back to normal. I do recall them saying, Senator, let's get back to freedom. And that's what I'm asking you members to join today in doing. The way we're operating now, with one person making all the decisions for Minnesota, is not right, and it's not freedom. So before we begin reading the two articles, a couple things that you need to know. Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat, has retained his peacetime emergency powers. These powers allow him to issue executive orders, such as the closing of schools and businesses, which we saw in March, without deliberation from the House of Representatives or the Senate. The House of Representatives currently is in the control of the Democrats. This simply means that there are more Democrats than Republicans, so they often side with Walz because he too is a Democrat, and they are doing so with regard to these peacetime emergency powers. The Senate, on the other hand, is in control of the Republicans, which again simply means that there are more Republican voters than Democrat voters, who on the topic of emergency powers disagree with Walz. By design, our three branches of government, the executive, which Governor Walz represents, the legislative, the House and the Senate represent, and the judicial, have equal footing and cooperate to make decisions in the best interest of the state, right? So, and this is designed this way so that we can get all voices and we can kind of hear all sides of an argument. It works pretty well. I mean, we're a nation that has been around for a couple hundred years now, and this is a system that seems to work. However, in times of emergency or great stress, like a pandemic, for example, the governor can put into place emergency powers that allow him or her to make decisions without the approval of both the House and the Senate in the name of expediency. In other words, he or she can bypass the deliberation and the voting because there's an urgency that needs to be in place to accomplish whatever task needs to be accomplished. And of course, this is not like a wartime emergency, right? This is a peacetime emergency because we're dealing with a pandemic. There's no immediate, war-like threat. But a war might be another time to evoke emergency powers. Hello and welcome to Tuesday Newsday number 1. Here we go. It's my favorite day of the week. And we are going to work on a specific learning goal each Tuesday where the better that you get at this, the more clarity that you're going to have in deciphering an argument. Why is deciphering an argument important? Well, you'll be able to sort of parse out what's being said, and you might be able to look past, for example, you're buying a car. Let's say you want to go buy a car. And the salesman says you need this, 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 and this. And instead of going, okay, you'll be able to say, wait a minute, you said I need this, but I don't want this. And so we need to renegotiate. You'll be able to decipher what the main idea is, and it will help you, in that case, maybe save some money or get more of what you want. So working on identifying those central ideas is important because it allows you to kind of address your needs better. We're going to practice that here every Tuesday from now through the end of the year. So our learning goal is to determine 2 or more central ideas of a text and analyze their development over the course of that text, including how they interact and build on one another. At the end of today's lesson, you will be asked to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 4. A 4 means that you can identify the central idea or ideas. You can identify the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point, and you're able to identify how those ideas build on one another. A 3 means that you can identify the central idea or ideas and the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point, but you're not really able to point out how those ideas build on one another. A 2 means that you can identify the central ideas, but you're not really pointing to the evidence. This is kind of like not showing your work in math. If you don't show your work in math, it doesn't really matter to us teachers that you can get the right answer, because the right answer is simply a byproduct of the process. And I hate to break it to you, but school has never been about getting the right answer. It's always been about the process, because that's how we learn to critically think. And a 1 means you are unsure of how to find the central idea. If you're at a 1 or a 2, that is okay with me. Please tell me, because it helps me kind of clarify the questions and how I ask the questions here to make the information more accessible to you. All right, and so I've moved here to the worksheet, and I'm going to sort of address some of these, and some of these questions you will have to address on your own. All right, so here we are back at the worksheet. I have answered some of the questions for you, especially the ones that you're just pulling from the article anyway, not ones that require a lot of production of thought on your end, creativity on your end. But the ones that you would just pull right from the article anyway and put in the worksheet, I've decided to answer for you. So identifying the topic, the Minnesota GOP, or the Republicans, a grand old party, that typically aligns with the Republicans, don't sign or won't sign the bonding bill unless Governor Wallace, a Democrat, gives up his emergency powers. So what I'd like you to do right now is summarize the story. Article 1 at this point. The article itself is in Ed Puzzle off to the right. Your task right now is to summarize the story in 12 words. And now summarize the story in 32 words. And right now you should see Article 2 off on the right, a link to that story. And what I'd like you to do is summarize that story in 12 words now. And now in 32 words. And the reason that I have you summarize them in a different length of words is because it forces you to really think about the details, right? And the main idea and what is important. 12 words really asks you to pare it down. What are sort of the nuts and bolts of this article? 32 words asks for more detail, asks you to kind of flesh out some of the ideas that take place in the story. First and last sentence for Article 1, listed here and listed here. And often what these will do is they will give us sort of an insight into what the main idea will be. And as the last sentence, a recap of what the main idea was, what was important in the story. And the same is true here for Article 2. And so what I'd like you to do right now is identify the main idea of the article. Remember before you answer that the main idea and the topic are different. The topic simply gives you an insight into what you're going to be reading about. The main idea comes through in the details, so be paying attention to those details. Next, I'd like you to respond to the quote. From Article 1, I've got 2 quotes. One of them says, "There are many things that the governor has emergency powers over that we're saying that must end. And we need to get back to a place where the House and Senate have equal footing with the executive branch," the top Senate Republican said. Your job is to answer, how does this quote support the main idea of the article, the main idea that you suggested? And I suppose this question is a bit redundant, so I will actually remove that. You don't have to answer that one. The next is, I can't imagine why we would support this when our governor is doing an excellent job in putting us in a position to survive this with the minimum amount of damage. This quote was given by a House Democrat. So this is obviously in support of the governor's actions. This one, based on these 2 words, is in response to the governor's actions. Article 2. The peacetime emergency has provided us the tools to save lives and mitigate the devastating impacts of this pandemic, Walz, a Democrat, said in a statement released Monday. As cases skyrocket in other states, we can't let our guard down. So I'm going to ask you this. Why was this quote included in the story? Why was this quote important to the main idea? And now the second quote. By putting these two issues together, we make it possible to have both a bonding bill and a tax bill, Portman said, where neither would be possible on their own. How does this quote support the main idea? And now something that is new this year for those of you who, this is one of your first two Tuesday News Days, you obviously didn't see how this kind of went last year, but this is something I'm adding to the questions because I think it's important to start for critical thinking, for analysis, for kind of making inferences again. It's everything we do, like I said, is about inferences. We work specifically with it on Mondays, but if you only made inferences on Mondays, a lot would go wrong for you. So we need to make inferences in everything that we do. So we're going to talk about tone and bias. One, I intentionally pulled two articles that had opposing viewpoints on this same topic, right? The not passing the bonding bill until the emergency powers were up. Which article do you think sides with the Senate, which is the more conservative bias or the more conservative bent? And which article sides with the House, which would have a more liberal bent? Which article do you think sides with the Senate? And which article do you think sides with the House? And lastly, what about those articles gave you your answers? So two things before we wrap up here. One, the main idea of the article is that the House and Senate are at a deadlock and cannot move forward until they agree on what to do about this bonding bill. And then obviously the emergency powers as well. So if you had that, you're on the right track. Going back to what you wrote, think back to what you wrote about the main idea of the two articles just a couple of minutes ago. What can you add? What might you change to your own answer based on what you know here? At the time that this video was created, I thought that this was worth noting. However, it does appear that Senate Republicans might be forcing the governor's hand here. There is a lawsuit in court currently challenging the governor's orders on the grounds that it is unconstitutional. The article is at the right. And finally, your last question is, where would you rate your ability to find the central idea of the text? Would you rate yourself a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1?